Hi, everyone. I'm Hessie Jones, and I am from our company. Tonight we have our Blended Generation think tank. And welcome back. This is our fifth episode tonight, and we're going to be tackling the topic on ageism, racism, sexism in the workplace. So as moving forward, just so you know what we're doing, we're actually going to take the topics that we have and start to look at them with respect to each generation. So we're going to have a Boomers episode, Gen X, Millennial, and then we're going to have one blended hangout. The idea is to get a holistic view of the issues on each of the topics so we can actually do like a summary at the end of every month. So when we talk about these isms in the workplace, we're actually going to take a look at all the generations as they come together, Boomers, Gen Xers, as well as Gen Y. And one thing with our company is that we're exploring this idea of the future of work and how things need to change. And these are some of the most sensitive topics today, but the reality is that they do exist. But what we want to tackle is, what are people's personal experiences with respect to these things, and have we progressed over time, or do they really exist in a different form? Okay, so just a couple of stats, and you might have heard some of these stats as you listen to some of our previous think tanks, but the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, back in, I think, between 2013 and 2014, actually logged in about 89,000 discrimination complaints in the U.S. 35% of them were race-related, 29.3% were sex-related, 23% were disability-related, and 23.2% were age-related. With respect to the wage gap, we also ran a think tank probably a month and a half ago on women and the glass ceiling, and it indicated that for every dollar paid to a man, women are getting paid close to 84 cents on that dollar. African women and Latinas get paid even less than that. Now, when we look at the male side, in 2013, black males get paid 75 cents for every dollar paid to a white male, with Hispanics actually making 67 cents for every dollar made by a white male. Okay, so from an education perspective, what's really interesting is that a lot more women are enrolling in colleges, and from an education perspective, they're the ones that are actually graduating at higher rates than males, and yet women who are actually, let's say, graduating at higher degrees than the undergraduate degree still earn only 69% of what men earn at that degree level. So we're going to try to tackle all three, ageism, sexism, and racism within this panel, and we have a good diverse group of people. So let's get at it. I want you to, first of all, state your name, what generation you belong to, and what you currently do. Okay, and then we can get into questions right after. So I'll start on my right. Suleiman.
Hi, I'm Suleiman Ahmed. I guess I'm a Gen Xer. Trying to do the math in my head. I'm an educator. Our firm is called Servoanix. We're educators. We work with senior executives, primarily C-suite and the board level, and we teach them how to use digital technology.
Great. And Ryan?
Oh, I don't think I'm muted. Okay, good. My name's Ryan Pennell. I am Gen X, right in the middle, and I manage a hedge fund.
Okay.
Which just means we take money and make it into more money. That's it.
Okay, and Jermaine.
Yes, I'm Jermaine. I am a online marketer as well as a direct care provider for MRDD.
And you are a millennial.
Yeah, I'm a cusper, so I'm like just right in there in the millennial category.
Okay, so when you say cusper, so you're an older millennial, right?
Yes, older millennial.
Perfect. Diane?
I'm a boomer, sort of smack in the middle of boomer, well, middle end, but definitely a boomer.
Okay.
And I am a leadership and business coach, executive coach. So I help smart people talk with smart people persuasively, convincingly, and empathetically.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay, Carol Ann.
Oh, well, my name is Carol Ann Dykes. I'm in Orlando, as is Diane, and I'm like her in the boomer generation, and I work with entrepreneurs, science and technology, startup companies. I currently manage a UCF, a University of Central Florida business incubator that's all science and technology companies. So I have a lot of entrepreneurs, great diversity of entrepreneurs. I have a lot of female entrepreneurs, obviously a lot of men of all ages too. I mean, I have millennials, I have boomers, I have Gen X's, everything pretty much. So, and college students working in those companies, a lot of different employees of a lot of different races and ages and ethnic and religious backgrounds. So it's a really diverse population in the incubator, as it is at most universities. So makes it very
It looks like you're going to be able to bring a lot to this conversation because of the experience that you have, and also because of the different types of people that you work with, especially in the tech space. I think we're going to actually talk about that as well. Okay, so I guess the first question is the type of workplace you work in, and this could be, if you are an entrepreneur, this may not necessarily apply, but what also happens is that you actually have had experience, let's say in corporate, or have been in situations where you've actually dealt with people of other cultures. And so what we're trying to tackle as a first question is, what's the overview of, let's say, discrimination in general in the workplace? Have you yourself, let's say, witnessed or experienced it from a personal perspective, or have you actually overtly seen it? So let's start with Suleiman.
Oh, wow. Start with the right. Okay. I mean, I can only speak from experience. I've, growing up in the East Coast of Canada, Nova Scotia, back in the late 70s, early 80s, that song, One of These Things is Not Like the Other, that was probably would apply, but I was fortunate that I didn't face a lot of overt discrimination, but I think I'm not naive to suggest it doesn't exist. There wasn't a history. I would also be candid in saying that African Canadians faced it a lot worse. Halifax itself has a history of that. Anyone can look it up, but what our parents raised me and my sister with was just the values that, pardon my French, but don't let the buggers hold you down. So whether you're a minority, a woman, gay, whatever, you just have to work harder and be so good that they can't say no to you. So that was a driving motivator. I'm not suggesting that works in every case or with everyone. In terms of work, there was two times when it kind of flashed its head. One time when I remember, I'm really dating myself, I used to collect hockey cards and comic books, and this guy was in the card store, and he owned a restaurant, and he was looking for a busboy. He was saying he was really looking for people to hire, so I went to apply, sign on the door, and then didn't get a call, nothing, but maybe I just wasn't panned out for it. The second time was working with another organization. I won't say who, but at one point doing an event, some people had too many soda pops, including one of the directors, and they basically came out and said, "You're never going to break director level."
Wow.
Doesn't matter if you speak the language, doesn't matter that you've got a master's degree, you're not of this, enter hashtag, whatever you want to call it, demographic. to me, that was revealing, but I appreciated his candor, and so promptly 6 months later, I got approached and recruited by Sears, and I left and went to another place, and there was a lot more different. You know.
Would you say that?
Did I answer your question there? I just don't know.
No, you did. You did. My question to you is, did you leave because
oh, damn straight I did. Because my view was I've got a master's degree in computer science, and I'm working with someone who's got a high school degree. Not that education's a sole factor, but in spite of that, they're still holding me down. Well, I'm leaving, and I'll go to some place where they respect what I do. I'll get paid more money, work with smarter people who aren't ignorant. So game on. And but not everyone has that opportunity. Some people, because of family circumstances, personal circumstances, health, financial, aren't in a position to do that. But I just try to remember how that felt. So if in any of our work or clients where I've observed that, whether it's discrimination to women, ageism, even reverse, like, well, that person's a honky, pardon the French, but I think you judge the individual by their character and their integrity, not by that. And I think it works on both sides of the coin, because I've seen reverse racism towards Caucasians from visible minorities, and I think you can't be a hypocrite. You're either straight on the line or you're not. And if we're going to talk about tech, let's talk about tech. Tech companies have an abhorrent representation of women in leadership and at board level, of visible minorities. Let's look at Silicon Valley. Let's look at all the top companies, including Alphabet or Apple. They have no visible minorities on their board, and I'm not suggesting you need quotas, but you can't tell me that there aren't qualified people that can be there. So I'll stop talking now and pass it.
No, and that's that's good to hear. I think I want to hear from Carol Ann, because I think we're kind of segueing into the tech sector a little bit, and so from a racism perspective, that's one area, but as you know, there's, and I'm not saying that one type of ism is dominant over the other, but there is blatant sexism within the tech sector as well.
Can I make one quick point I do want to make? A lot of my mentors and supporters throughout my career, many of them have been Caucasian and otherwise, where they have given me the opportunities to push me forward. So I don't want to point the finger at one group or another, because that would be hypocritical. So I've been blessed that way. So.
Yeah, and so we're not making sweeping generalizations, but your personal experiences are what they are. So, so Carol Ann, from your perspective, and where Suleiman talked about, where he experienced overt racism, and where somebody actually said, because you are blank, you will not make this level. With women, because it's a lot more sensitive a topic, there's this thing that we had talked about it in one of the previous hangouts about microaggression, where it's less revealing, or it's more like under the hood type language that's not overt enough to go to HR, right? And so can you talk about that a little bit, especially within the tech industry?
Someone was talking, I was thinking about the environment that I work in, and there are differences in different environments too. Because I have always worked primarily with small companies, and even some medium-sized ones, but really small companies, I don't see that female discrimination as much as perhaps you do when you get into a really large corporation. And for some reason, in the defense industry, the military, which I've always been pretty heavily involved in, there are some pretty large companies that, like the CEO of Lockheed Martin's a female, very strong, very well respected, and we have a lot of our homegrown tech companies in that space here in Orlando that have female founders and CEOs, and women and vice presidents. And in my incubator right now, I have about 45 current clients, many of whom are doing government business, and many that are not too. But literally about a third of my founders and CEOs are female right now, and I don't see it certainly as much, and where the world that I'm in, we're a very different environment than, say, in a Silicon Valley probably or something, and I don't know the dynamics of that kind of society. But as I look around Orlando, everything that's happening with the real churn and rapid growth of startup companies in the tech space, seeing a lot of young women out there. Not as many as we'd like, but I don't get the sense that there's any discrimination or any thought that women are less capable. I think what the problem is, and this gets to the whole STEM education issue, science, technology, engineering, is math, is there are not a lot of women coming into those fields that can take on those leadership positions in those really highly technical fields a lot of times. And I think it makes a difference that I'm in a university setting as well, and I've always been in an academic setting where there are a lot of women faculty members, there are a lot of women researchers that are very highly respected.
There's one thing that was brought up in one of our last hangouts, and the reason I brought this up, especially from a tech perspective, is that there is a dominance of, like, for even within STEM, of men in developer and engineering positions, and and then, so what I've heard, and then there's this thing called, if you guys haven't heard it, it's called the bro culture, right? Have you guys heard of the bro culture? Yes. Okay. And so, Jermaine, you totally understand it, and it's this whole idea of the frat party, right? The focus is on partying, being tougher than everybody else, kicking ass, right? And so what that comes with is an attitude towards women that could be perceived as misogynistic, right?
Right. And women are really uncomfortable in that environment, whether it's overtly aimed at them or not. It creates a very uncomfortable and unwelcoming environment for people.
Right. Now, Jermaine, sorry, go ahead, Diane.
I just wanted to add on to what Carolyn was saying, because it's something I've noticed. Before I came to Orlando, I found my clients, which were often larger companies and some Fortune 500, across industries, that I would find sexism, and at the time I was in my mid-30s, so ageism was less an issue. Sexism was much more prevalent, and sometimes it was underhanded and so on. But we have a huge gaming community here, and I remember when over a couple of, and I'm involved in an organization in a meetup that Carol Ann is involved in too. It's Women and Minorities in Tech, and I brought up, could we have a meeting, because I was organizing this at one point, how about a meetup where we addressed how do we better mitigate these issues? The response from the women, the other women who are millennials and Gen X, was, what problem? For some reason, it's almost as if we've been able to grow a community that doesn't foster that attitude. And I find that generally true, that women feel very comfortable speaking up here in Orlando. It makes us, it's one of the things I think I love that makes us different from Silicon Valley. Our male CEOs are not like the CEO of Snapchat or Uber. Thank you very much, and I'm really grateful for that. We have guys who are really empathetic, even if they are deciding to move back to the West Coast, like Phil, who just sold Split Analytics, very successful entrepreneur, who started a gaming company, then an analytics company, just sold it, and I'm sad that he's going away. But he's not alone. There are others like him. Sure, we find it. We probably exist in certain military environments, but as Carol Ann said, one of our top engineering firms that has just boomed is a woman CEO, ex-military, who has done exceptionally well. I'm sure Carol Ann's worked with her personally, but she's won all kinds of awards. She's a great employer, and she's known for that. For both men and women. I mean, she's looked to help people who are traditionally overlooked.
Okay.
So,
no, that's actually good to hear. For some reason, I haven't heard like good news like that in quite a long time, and it's nice to see that at least there are you know, factions outside of Silicon Valley that are a little bit more progressive than others.
it surprised me. This is not a progressive town.
Well,
but I find it consistently the case when it comes that it's much more performance oriented, and it seems to be gender neutral. And I'm really happy to report that. I can't say that it's true anywhere else, but
okay, cool. Okay, Jermaine, tell me about your experiences. So so you fall in. You're male. You're millennial.
Yes.
And
Yes.
okay, so maybe
Correct.
2 out of the 3. Tell me about your experiences.
Well, it was kind of awkward for me because I grew up pretty much in suburban areas. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, so we grew up in the burbs. And when I moved up north to Ohio, it was actually the first time that I moved into a primarily black neighborhood. So when I got out into the work world or whatever, I kind of had a different perception on everything. Like I really wasn't thinking of things from like a black perspective because I didn't have to, you know, face a lot of that growing up. But you know, once I became an adult, you know, my mentality is like, you know, we're all the same, we're all equal. I mean, because that's kind of what happens when you come from the other side and move, you know, to your own. And so one of my earliest experiences was when I started my career. I had a regular job at a retail store, and they brought in a Caucasian male to come work at the store. And it was interesting. My manager asked me to train this guy, and so I ended up training him. And 2 weeks later, he became my manager. So it was kind of an off experience, and that, you know, kind of set the stage for me going forward in life. So when we're talking about now, where I'm into the social media marketing, I am more in tune with, you know, that kind of racism and, you know, I guess ageism or whatever, because the guy I trained was older than me, but they would never offer me the position as a manager. But I was good enough to train him, but I wasn't good enough to actually be in that position. So, I mean, it's kind of like made me think about how some of the things are going on, because especially when we talked about the bro culture and that kind of stuff in the social media sphere, I do see a lot of that. And when we're interacting, I mean, when you hear about a woman being a CEO, they talk about how she runs the company different. But I mean, I'm at a place where I'm kind of thinking that, you know, it shouldn't really matter what you are as far as how you manage or whatever, but it should matter like what skills you have.
So I think your manager or whoever was in charge of hiring for that position, did they explicitly did they disinvite you into applying for that role, or did they actually go out and say?
I had no idea that I was even training a potential manager. You know, when they brought the guy to me, they was like, well, hey, he's from another store. Why don't you kind of like, you know, show him the ropes? So they understood that I knew the position well enough to, you know, transfer my skills onto him. But then when he became my manager 2 weeks later, that kind of like, that was a definite shock for me. And then after that, you know, I ended up still mostly doing the task that I trained him to do.
How was your relationship with him afterwards?
It was kind of touchy because, like I said, on a daily basis, his actual title was my boss. But when I would come to work, you know, he would ask me to do all the things that he was supposed to be doing that I actually trained him to do. And I did understand, because this is way back when I was 19. So I was aware enough to understand that he was getting paid more than I was to do the job that I trained him to do, and I was actually still doing his actual job.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so Ryan, because you seem to be, I don't know what kind of title to give you, because you seem to be in a
fund manager.
There you go. But you're in a premium seat because, first of all, you're white male.
Kathy, I'm a 42-year-old white male. I could not be less qualified to speak on my personal experience with discrimination.
Okay.
Like it's like asking the Astors to go into a little diatribe on poverty. Am I aware of it? Of course, right?
Okay.
It's all over the place. I work in a business there's I don't see I don't have a lot of experience with racism, either witnessing it or obviously being on the receiving end of it, in the workplace at least. But ageism and sexism, yeah, I mean, I work in high finance, for sure. It's vicious towards young people because they don't know anything, so you can't turn millions of dollars over to them without them screwing it all up, which was the same with us and the same with the boomers when they were that age. I mean, that's just how that business works. Sexism, I was thinking a lot about it coming up to this panel because there are a lot of things at play in this industry when it comes to sexism. Do you see a lot of power broker women traders? No, you don't. And is that because they're kept out of those roles? I haven't seen that as much as the mentoring that's required to succeed in that role is usually done by the most odious type of stereotypical male alpha personality. I don't think it's so much that the women are actively kept out of that role as they have no interest in spending any kind of time whatsoever in close proximity to the guys who would teach them how to do it. I mean, because the reality is that the men who are drawn to these jobs fall into one of three categories. They're greedy, and this is a means they see to get rich quickly. They don't last very long because they don't have the skill or the aptitude. They're very aggressive. That's the the stereotypical Wall Street trader. They don't exist as much anymore, but they certainly did. Yelling, screaming, hard drinking, hard partying, cursing, misogynistic maniacs. And the group that I fall into, which is a bunch of math geeks, who see it as a big puzzle and just want to solve problems. And the fact that you can make money doing that is a cool added bonus, but it's really the math that's the draw. And unfortunately, I think you were speaking to that earlier, math isn't an easy road for women. Not that it's a difficult skill, it's that they're not cultivated. They're from a young age. They should be. We need a lot more women in math for sure. That would be fantastic, but they're not. It's, oh, well, don't worry about that. You're probably not interested in math anyway. Great. So they don't get from a preschool age on up. There's no support for that. So we don't have a lot of female quants. We have a lot of East Indian quants. We have a lot of Asian quants. Not a lot of Caucasian quants. Okay. But for us, that's what the best technical analyst I know in the world, and most people would agree with me, is a woman. I think, frankly, if we had more women traders, it would be a less volatile market because they don't get sucked into the testosterone nonsense that just makes me nuts day to day. They wouldn't be that kill, kill, kill thing. It'd be a lot more calculated. But, I bring up
Is Ryan's
science presence.
Okay, we missed. Can you restate that last 5 seconds? Because you kind of popped out of there.
Oh, okay, sure. I just said I was somewhat biased in my opinions because my mother is a neurosurgeon. And so I grew up with a very strong, dominant. I mean, that's someone who, and she was the first female neurosurgeon in Canada at that time. That's someone who picked like an impossible to get into spot and then did it anyway. And
you're relaying her story to me about when you talked about her rising up through the ranks and actually the kind of difficulties that she experienced just being a woman neurosurgeon pitted against a dominantly, I guess, male group of doctors who were in the same field. And did they make it difficult for her to succeed?
It was brutal. It was brutal. I mean, the attitude at that time, I was like, by the time she was in her neurosurgical residency, I was 13 or something. She didn't even go to medical school till I was 6. So she was older, first of all. And then, you had this this male-dominated medical community whose opinion was, you know what, we can have women doctors as long as they're pediatricians or GPs or OBs. Yeah, stay in there, but cardiac and neuro, forget it. Like that's man territory there. You know, there's no way you can possibly do the two most dominant, difficult surgical professions. And the States, they had several, but in Canada there were none at that time, and it just wasn't accepting to that. It was a very, very difficult road for her.
Okay, so Carol Ann, so Ryan talks about this idea that we don't cultivate women in let's say STEM or like math or any of those programs early enough. Do you think? And everybody says, and I don't know if this is there's a stereotype. There's this one chess player, I forgot his name, who talked about the fact that it just didn't come naturally to the female psyche. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, when Ryan was talking, and I was thinking about a lot of the stories that I've heard from young women, particularly as I've talked to them in middle school and high school and even college, some of our young women in UCF, and I asked them what some of their challenges have been and challenges they've had to overcome. And sadly, I guess if we were to talk about a category of parental discrimination, we are a reflection of what we grew up with, the attitudes, the biases, the prejudices, the filters that we grew up with, and so many parents still buy into these notions that they don't support their daughter or even their son sometimes, regardless, but particularly young women, and encouraging them to go into these careers. Now, yes, a lot of times it's because parents themselves aren't that well versed in what the career opportunities are, but there is just this general societal view still, I think, sometimes that women aren't as likely to succeed, especially in those professions where it takes a lot of confidence, it takes a lot of self-confidence and self-security to be successful. And it seems like a lot of people don't necessarily think that women have that, and a lot of times young women don't. So it's this vicious cycle, it seems like.
Yeah. I want to... Go ahead, Jermaine. Go ahead.
Yeah, he looked like he was chomping at the bit to say something.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to interject because I do have a personal experience for what you're saying as far as the parental piece. I do know a lot of women, or not a lot, but a few of the women I actually worked with directly that kind of had that self-limiting attitude, in their own, where there was one that would tell me she couldn't do things because she was a woman. And she would directly reference like some of the skills and things that I had going on. Like if I said I can do social media, or if I said I can do anything, she's like, oh, well, that's because you're a man and I'm a woman, and men do these kind of things. And it kind of confused me because my mother kind of changed that view for me, because she was pretty much a superhero. I mean, anything she wanted to do, she did. But I do understand that, yeah, there are some women out there where that's the thing that's like drilled into their head, like, well, I can't do it because I'm of a different gender and I'm just, weaker than you. And that's one of the things I think that's kind of got to be eradicated.
Yeah. The one thing that I remember from a previous hangout when we talked about, the whole glass ceiling effect was that, and maybe it's a female thing, but we're conditioned to kind of speak, not necessarily speak softly, but not be as aggressive, right? Or to take the other's viewpoint. I guess from our perspective, we're natural caregivers, and we're now naturally altruistic. Not saying that men aren't, but the problem is that when you're in a role where you're in let's say an environment where there are traditionally males dominant, you either you play the game. You either become a male or you become the anti-male, which I think we talked about, like the lean-in type thing, stereotype, and you become either flirtatious and you manipulate it so that from your perspective, you're getting what you want, but you kind of toggle between aggression and, let's say, flirtation, and you become a chameleon because you have to figure out what's going to get you to the place that you want to be. Diane, do you believe that?
Unmute. I do think there is still a lot of that. I also think, I was thinking about the microaggressions as well. I know that I have been tagged as aggressive when a man would be seen as a go-getter or simply assertive. I think that the same traits, there's been plenty of evidence and studies on this too, that, you know, blind resumes or blind performance reviews between male and female, if you tag one Jill and the other Joe and otherwise they're identical, they are judged with that gender bias. And women are treated negatively for things that at the same time we say we're looking for. I find, though, that a lot of the while there is sexism writ large probably in the tech community, and Carol Ann and I may not have seen it as much here, I have friends who have felt it directly, and I'd also say that it's certainly, I mean, we all know we've got, there are 1,000 stories out there of it being present, and we've watched people disappear off Twitter because of it. So it's good. Someone who can also speak to this. Hi, Karima. Yeah.
Hi, Karima.
Hi, Karima.
She'll come on soon.
Yep. Okay. So, but as to that, I wanted to get back, and I'm trying to rephrase how you said it, Hesse. You were asking specifically about.
Yeah. Well, it's either aggression, or it's almost like being a chameleon and trying to manipulate
the anti-male thing. How do women respond? I think the hardest thing and most painful thing for me to see over the course of my career has been women who seem to mimic what were considered male traits, which made them particularly insensitive, not just to women, but to almost anyone. So it was as if they were going to repress their own empathy, one of their strongest traits, right? And I've seen that many times. It's almost as if it were beaten out of them. And they may, for whatever reason, I can't get into their heads necessarily, but yes, I've seen that, and it's awful to see. And then that becomes the stereotype, unfortunately, because it's really easy for men to do, or for anyone to do, to say, see, that's what happens when you give women an executive position. And it's not true at all. There are so many extraordinarily, you know, strong, leader-full women in the field.
I know, and that's an important thing, and it's really tough. I think I had this discussion earlier with someone about, you know, people like Marissa Mayer in the position that she's in. You know, how much can she say without alienating her male co-executives, right? And it's a fine line that you have to toe, because as much as you have to support your gender, at the same time you don't want to put your job at risk. Right?
I see it I see it more in sales positions at the higher level, and I see if there's still I mean, not a glass ceiling, but a rock solid ceiling, women in sales really have to crack that apart. It's much harder because
right.
they're caught in a bind where the traits that they really need to be successful are those that are held against them as women.
Yes. Now, I want to bring in Karima, who joined us late, but Karima, can you actually speak? I just wanted to see if your microphone is Your microphone is working? Okay,
yes, and I don't know why the video is not, so I'm kind of...
That's okay. Right now...
Wait, okay.
Okay,
there she is.
There you go. Okay, so why did you leave? Okay, so
get her earplug.
Yeah, so
Catherine, it's been ages. It's so good to see you.
Hey! Sorry I'm late. I was
okay.
actually dealing with a diversity and cultural awareness group.
Oh,
So,
perfect.
yeah.
Then you're forgiven. Okay, so we're talking about right now, I guess, so women and there's sexism, but I think from your perspective, I'd like to hear from you as a Gen X Black woman who, and the kind of, let's say, challenges that you face, I guess, in your career, and you've worked in both corporate as well as being an entrepreneur. So, from that perspective, can you respond to the last point that we talked about in women, how they have to, I guess, play in the workplace from an aggressive standpoint or manipulative, being a chameleon, that kind of thing. So, what's your viewpoint on that?
Is this like a politically correct kind of answer you want, or do you want the real one?
I want
the
your
French
answer.
one. She wants the French answer. Just give her the French one.
Okay, so I've seen...
En français.
En français, okay. Okay.
Si vous voulez, ça va.
Oh, génial! Whoa, this is great. So, look, I've seen both. I've seen women who are really like acting with confidence, being treated as, for like being called jerks or bitches. And those one are not usually desired, but they actually help and advance the debate for women. And I've seen the manipulative one, the sly one, being preferred, but those one I think digress women's right in workplace settings.
Why do you think the sly one is preferred? Because nobody understands immediately exactly what the tactic is, or
because they don't threaten people, and they don't threaten. I think, and this has taken me ages to realize, but they don't threaten people inadequacies and lack of awareness. So they just keep the status quo, and they usually are preferred.
Okay. So what about this idea of tokenism? Do you guys know what tokenism is? Right. It's idea. It's almost like having a policy or practice where it seems like you're moving towards, let's say, inclusion from the perspective of minority groups, and it's the effort to actually create a workforce that says that we are a culture of inclusiveness. And literally, what you're doing is you're actually just creating a sample of the workforce that says, okay, we are a diverse culture because you are here. So it's creating an example within the workforce. Now, has anybody ever experienced that, or felt like they were in position of privilege just because of a policy like that, and what has that done or impacted, or how has it impacted you? Like, Suleiman, from your perspective, is that something that you've seen, not even necessarily for yourself, but let's say in places that you've worked?
One thing that just stuck in my mind, like I also sit on the board of White Ribbon. I've been on the board for 7 years, and that's to end violence against women and girls globally. It was founded after l'École Polytechnique over 25 years ago in Montreal. And so my view is really on tokenism. Look, I don't care what you are, honestly, like, white, black, straight, gay, male, female. I think it's really integrity of someone. I try to check myself on that because I think racism's everywhere. We all have it. And I think we all have to keep ourselves in check. And for the only reason I don't want to be a hypocrite. And so, for example, any organization where I've worked, like my boss at Apple, Tina Brandon, was fantastic. I learned so much under her. Harlequin, which is an organization I work for, I wasn't good looking enough to be on the cover, so I ran digital marketing instead. I just don't have that Fabio thing going down quite yet. But, my point being was the environment and culture there was very strong, from Donna Hayes, or CEO, all the way down. And for our firm that we have, my full partner is a woman. And of our board, it's easy for people on Twitter and social media to criticize and say, well, there's not enough women on boards, there's not enough things. But then I turned around and looked at our own firm, and we're not a big organization. We're coming into 3 years, startup in tech. Well, only 1 out of our 5 board members was a woman. Then I realized, well, you're a hypocrite. And so we were fortunate that Linda Descano from Citibank joined, and it's just raised our game. So I want to avoid that, oh, we have to have women to be fair. No, you want to have women on your boards in your company because they'll help you make money and create better products and services and happier customers. This isn't a tokenism issue. This is a business issue, and I think, quite frankly, you're an idiot if you're running any kind of business and you don't have women involved. And that's my view. I think, I mean, one of our, I could go into more details, you know, and if that makes me some kind of self-hating man, give me the T-shirt.
Yeah, no good.
But I have a quick, just have a quick something I want to say to that. But isn't it more inclusion or it's really hard to verbalize this, but does that mean you're choosing women because they're women or because they're women who are competent, or are you because to me it's a little bit the same thing.
No, we're just strictly critiquing them because they're competent. I wouldn't want a competent. I wouldn't want an incompetent man or woman on our board or on our part of our team. Period.
So, and Karima's talking about it's almost like it's almost like a positive stereotype, right? It's not saying because of who she is, but we say women in general. And Ryan, remember I put that thing on Facebook about Jack Ma of Alibaba talking about the importance of women at executive levels, right? Because he said women in general are more nurturing. They care about everyone else, whereas males only care about themselves. And
yeah, but that's because someone told him to say that. That's not because that's what that guy believes.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, Hesse, you've heard Mark talk about Alibaba, so.
Yes, and my point was that regardless of the fact that whether or not he believed it or not, the fact that he said it, and even if it, like I said, if it was disingenuous, the fact that he said it and people heard it goes a long way towards our cause. And it's unfortunate, but we have to take what we can get, right? So,
sure, but I think that credit should go to his PR firm or his publicist rather than him. I mean, it coincided exactly with the bottom of his 2-week stock slump, and it went up 3% after that. I mean, he made me money by saying it. Great, thanks. That's a loser company. I don't invest in it, but I saw that quote, and we bought it for about 8 hours, and that's thanks. But that's not him. That's like him trying to stay out of the abyss.
Well,
one thing, sorry, Hesse, I do want to say to Karima, I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't believe in like a quota.
So affirmative action. Okay, no.
And I get why it's there. I'm not against affirmative action because it was created obviously for a need and a reason. I want to be clear on that. But the reason we did it was maybe in the beginning I thought, well, maybe we need to have more women on our board for diversity. But we already had one since we launched. Tamara Payton. I mean, she's extremely strong. I mean, she's got chops. She sits on boards for a few things, and we're blessed to have her there. And I find us we've only gone to strength when we've added Linda. So to me, that's where we're there. I think more people in business would be smarter on that. And in fact, there was research, and Diane made a comment, and maybe Ryan can speak to this because he would be strong in finance, but many firms that they said that during the financial crisis in 2008 that had a heavier population of women executives in leadership at a board level avoided the nonsense that happened in the financial meltdown. Now, I don't know if it's just because there were women. I don't know, and I want to source that, obviously, because it's like, well, I just thought of it, so I'm going to give you a quote. But there could be something there.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit because we haven't really tackled the notion of ageism, and because we have, so with 3 Gen Xers sitting in the middle, and we also have 1 millennial and then two boomers. The one thing I want to ask you guys is, okay, so maybe Jermaine specifically is, how does it feel to, let's say, work in an environment where and I took this from one of the last hangouts, that you have to pay your dues. Like, are you listened to? and how much of a voice do you have in your company?
Well, primarily when I started out and I kind of got into like the nonprofit sector, they leaned on me as the millennial because they thought that I understood.
Oh. Okay, so while we wait for him,
he was going to say he understood digital. That's what he was going to say right there. Because I understand digital. Oh, God.
Okay, so while we wait for him, maybe I'll ask Diane or Carol Ann. So one of the things that in a lot of organizations is that, you know, and I don't know whether or not it's there today, but there's this expectation. I'll get back to you, Jermaine. Okay, that women.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. That the people retire at 65, right? Mm. And so what that does is it makes room for the younger people to move up, Gen Xers to move up to higher positions, etc. Do you find with, let's say, people within your age bracket, within your generation, is there this notion that they have to hang on, and what is it? How do they react to people coming in and potentially phasing them out within their existing jobs? And you don't have to. It doesn't have to be necessarily personal, but if you've experienced it or you know people who've actually experienced that, can you just relate those experiences?
Carolyn?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know that, and I see this both sides of it. There are certain professions and even certain environments and like some of the federal agencies where, you know, you're expected to retire at a certain age for various reasons, and that is resulting in a huge knowledge drain in a lot of places, particularly in some of the longer-standing tech companies. But on the other hand, I see, and maybe it's because we live in Florida where the world comes to, quote, retire, but not many actually retire anymore. They come here and they want to stay active. And I think if you look at a lot of studies coming out about boomers these days, the highest rate of entrepreneurship is starting to be in the boomer generation.
Yeah.
Because, you know, at 65, 62 or 65, most of us are going to have another 20 years left, and you don't want to hang out in Florida. And yeah, you can go play golf a few times, but you don't want to do that all the time. So I see a lot of folks who have retired from one career, and they're boomers, and they're showing up knocking on my door at the incubator saying, I've got all this knowledge, I've got all this energy, I want to stay engaged, how can I help? You know, do you have companies that need a part-time executive, or I started a consulting company, you know, how can I help? So.
Okay, so those are the people that have been either, I guess, retired, forced retirement, or from their jobs, and so they just want to keep going?
Or chose to.
Or chose to.
Wherever they were, mainly because they wanted to move to Florida. Okay. Just a lot of them want to come to Florida. They leave a corporate position. Okay. They know they've got enough years left to start again, do it again.
Okay. Now, so Diane.
I mean, and Carol Ann and I have actually had something of a conversation about this because I know I'm not alone. I've been an independent for over 20 years, so since 1991, actually, on my own. So my entrepreneurship began that long ago. I mean, I built my own company, and then I cut my own company back. I liked being on my own. When I decided I wanted to go back and work in I don't want to call it necessarily a corporate context. It could have been, you know, an early stage context, say. But if I'm applying for I'm applying for jobs, it has to be a posted job. That's the first time I've ever experienced the kind of either sexism or ageism, and it happens in the interviews. It becomes really apparent, and I think if I'm not equally qualified, it's fine. If they're looking for somebody different, it's fine. I'd rather somebody told me. It doesn't. It's rare that that happens. You end up, so you just have to sort of move on in that case, because that's not where I can fight the battle. You can't fight the battle when you're the applicant. You can only fight it from the other side. That is, trying to help companies you work with or mentor to look at what the opportunities are. And the flip side of that, and so that can be very frustrating, and I have a number of friends who are my age who have felt that ageism, like, you're too old to be coming back into the workforce. Well, wait, I haven't left the workforce. I'm just changing my course of direction, and there's a real brick wall for a lot of folks. It makes me say, maybe it's not so bad being an independent, because I can continue to build that client base. But it's very hard. I find there's almost a groupthink about it when you go into a more structured environment.
Yeah.
And you're looking for a position there. Either you're overqualified or underqualified, or they're looking for someone young that they can bring up, or you're going to be too the implicit biases are you're too set in your ways. You're going to want to do it your way, not our way, as opposed to how might we find the best way to do this.
Well, I think also what I hear is that someone who's older and has a lot of experience, but we don't want to pay that much money,
Yeah,
bring
you're too
somebody
expensive.
younger because we can get them cheaper.
Okay,
I hear that all the time.
That's the microaggression.
Yeah.
And they also assume that if you're older and willing to work, from an ageism perspective, this happens with women as well, though. If you're willing to work for less, there must be something wrong.
There must be something wrong, yeah, or you're not going
So
to.
you're caught in that catch-22, and unfortunately, it is unspoken. It's an unspokenism. It's an unspoken bias. So you can't. It's not like you can address it in an interview. You can only talk about it outside an interview, or you leave going, this is what I felt. And I have heard people say we are looking for millennials, which I think is great, by the way, to be looking for when we're talking diversity. But I am concerned, as Carol Ann brought up, that when you push people out, as we often do, that there's a difference between people hanging on and pushing people out because they're old. Because you want that pass-off to work smoothly. I mean, the best thing you can do is have both mentorship and reverse mentorship, because that's a really rich environment if generations are working cross generations together and sharing those different skill sets.
Now, Diane, so what, I know we're running out of time, and I wanted to get Jermaine in here. I want to just extend it for a couple of minutes, but understanding where you're coming from an ageism perspective. And I also want to ask Ryan, Karima, and Suleiman whether or not, I mean, yes, you are Gen Xers, but there is a point of relevance as well, and whether or not you feel like you're being phased out in opportunities, whether or not within your capacities. So, Jermaine, did you want to just start? I know you wanted to speak to the ageism question that we had earlier. Or did you? Are you? Oh, no, there's two of them again. Okay, so.
One is now for two.
Okay. Oh, okay. So why don't I get like one? Oh, okay. Are you back now?
Yeah, I'm having crazy tech issues, but I'm back.
Okay. Why don't you talk while we have you, so we can get. Okay. So ageism.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Like I was saying, there's been points where there's been a benefit, but there's also been points where it's been, kind of the opposite. Because like someone mentioned before, where they're looking for millennials, that's kind of a new thing. When I first started working, it was the opposite side of that. It was like the Gen Xers and the Boomers were kind of running the show. I mean, not to be like, boxing it in, but they were kind of running the show. So when I came on, a lot of my ideas were a little bit too creative, for those sectors. I would come up with innovative ways to do something, but they would tell me, well, this is the way we've done it. And so we would end up just doing it that way, and I would have to adapt to those older ways. Now that social media and everything has gotten involved, things have kind of flipped around to where people are now looking to millennials to kind of lead that charge because you know, they assume that we have a better hold on that type of thing because the technologies were around when we were growing up, so we grew up with them. So I'm experiencing the exact opposite of what I used to experience. They're looking for my creativity now, whereas before they just wanted me to fit into the mold of what was going on.
Okay, so does that, like, so Ryan and Suleiman and Karima, when you hear that, do you think that's unfair? I mean, is that, I mean, that's reverse ageism, where they're thinking that millennials know because they grew up with technology, when in fact, they may know it because it's indigenous to their being, but they can't apply it from a business perspective. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so I don't know about sorry, I missed the beginning. So Suleiman, what do you do? I just want to put stuff into perspective. I know what Ryan does.
Yeah. I'm an educator. I teach.
Okay, so in my field, which is digital marketing, I actually compete with millennials a lot, but I've heard lately, almost 100% of the time, that I was a very good alternative to the millennials because usually, and I'm not saying that because I really, and Hesse can tell you, German, how I hate being boxed into Gen X or whatever it is, millennial mindset. I really do hate that labeling. But the reason why they tell me that is because they also have an image of the millennial in their head, which is the tattooed guy with a, you know, man bun or whatever it is, and you know, that comes into their office and talk to them about tools. When I come into their office, I don't talk to them about tools. I talk to them about business and how they can actually grow business. And so what I'm saying is there's always prejudice, and it doesn't matter if you're Gen X or, you know. So I don't know what the question was. It was ageism, or I just got lost into it because I was, you know, because I do get that in the, you know, and you know.
That's the whole thing. Is that it's like when recruiters ask, we want to hire a millennial because they know better, they know more about the technology, they know more about collaboration. And that's not necessarily the case. Suleiman, Ryan, do you have any closing thoughts on that?
I've just got one quick example. When one of our clients was one of the big banks, and we worked and we were talking to them about one of the social platforms. And one of them was in his 60s, and he sat there in the chair and his arms were folded. And you could see just by the defensive posture and nature, you know, you could read it right away. And I looked at him and I thought, you think this is a pile of bullshit, don't you? And he goes, yup. And I said, you know what? You're right. Most of social media is. And I don't think he was waiting for that response, because you're going to try and convert someone to that. And I said, but if you would give me 45 minutes to show you the opportunity, would you give me a chance? And then he looked at me and he smiled and he goes, you got 40 minutes, kid. Dance. And to this point, years later now, this executive jet is killing it. Like, he's just, because the experience that he has, when you couple the knowledge of digital and technology with that, no one can compete with that. Like, he's just kicking their ass, and it's awesome to see. It inspires me because it says, okay, well, when I'm older, I can't get lazy or comfortable. You know, look at Thomas Edison, what he did, and other innovators out there, men and women. So to me, but I see the flip side of what Jermaine said, is you can't discount other people either, but I think it's foolish to say, well, you're in your 20s, you got a Twitter account and a blog, so you're a social media expert. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like,
exactly.
Now, that's my old man rant for the night. I'll stop. But
okay.
To me, it's inspiring what I do when we teach these leaders, because you can't teach experience. It comes with time, mistakes and wins, and so I think it's a greater opportunity, and I think businesses make that same mistake when they discount someone who's seasoned. Like, how stupid are you?
Exactly.
Because you have no idea what's going to come. So.
Yeah.
Again, I'll get off the podium.
Yeah, one thing that you did is, and especially when it comes to CEOs, a friend of mine told me something really smart, and he said, meet somebody where they're at, right? Don't be patronizing to them. Understand where they're coming from, and then add another layer to it, and that's how they respond.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Let everyone preserve their dignity.
Exactly. Okay. So we're going to close, but I want Ryan to have the closing remarks. If you have anything that you want to add to this entire discussion.
And that's awkward. Picking the white male to close the thing on ageism, sexism, and discrimination. You know, let's give the final say to this guy who everyone listens to.
So
I hold all the cards.
Yeah, Ryan, did you learn anything from all this?
Did I learn anything from all this? Well, no. I mean, I think. They're good subjects to dialogue on, and it's nice. It's interesting to hear people's specific experiences with it. As given that I don't have any in the workplace. I mean, what I didn't mention is that I grew up one of 5 Caucasian kids in Chinatown. I went to a school with 695 Asian kids. So it's not. I do understand the minority experience. I had an hour of Mandarin class a day, which was not easy for a white boy who did not speak it at home. But in the workplace, it was very different. You know, it is very different. Do I wish it were otherwise? Absolutely. It certainly does seem to be progressing. I mean, the fact that I have not personally witnessed any in my entire career in either this business or film and television, I've seen ageism and I've seen sexism. I haven't seen racism. And you know, if I have a discussion with my mother about that, who was, you know, prior to becoming a doctor, a photographer in and around the civil rights movement and followed Dr. King around, like that's incredible to her. You know, I mean, she drank out of a water fountain that said whites only. So the fact that her son, just one generation away, has zero experience with discrimination, race-based discrimination in the workplace. And I'm certainly not saying that it doesn't exist, but it used to be everywhere. And for someone like me who conducts business globally to have never seen it is pretty cool progress. I think that ageism will always exist. It's existed throughout our civilization. When the old get old, it's sad because they should be seen as the guardians of the most knowledge you can get. I mean, the world of the elders should definitely come back instead of simply discounting, and technology plays a role in that. You know, we discount their experience because we say, well, you're not in tune with the technology, and that is the arbiter of currency these days. So therefore, you have nothing to say. You know, you lived through wars, you've escaped tyrannical regimes, still nothing. You had no value to me if you can't operate an iPhone with the same efficiency that I can, and that is really, really sad. So I think that will, until we get our heads oriented in a better place, that will continue. I hope that the sexism changes, because it's one of those weird backward things that just makes me feel like we are not evolving at the pace we could have, and there's no reason for it, no scientific proof that it should be the way it is. So why do we do it? Insecurity, I think, maybe. I don't know. I don't have despite my age and gender and race, I don't have all the answers.
There you go. But despite being like the colorless male in this group, you actually.
Can we talk about blondism, because I do have blondism. I always get beaten, whatever it is, whether it's a pitch, a work environment, whatever. There's always like a blonde beating me.
Yeah.
I have no idea why.
Okay.
I don't know why either. I don't really like them.
They always win on me.
That's why I color my hair, right, Karima? Anyway, with that, I apologize.
Or you bring Diane to your.
That's why I don't color my hair. I mean, that's why I stopped coloring my hair, because when it turned all white, I mean, that was like the first time in my life that I was blonde.
Now you got 18-year-olds trying.
That's true. Okay, so with that, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
And this was a very fruitful discussion. And if there's any part of this that we need to extend again, I will find out from the actual footage. But thank you, and we will catch some of you in some of our future ones. I think our next one will be work and culture. So take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Suleiman. I'll send you more.